Marian.
Well, it's interesting. We'll get back to our breaking news now. Hundreds of thousands of Egyptians have flooded into the heart of Cairo, shouting and chanting in Tahrir Square, the most massive call yet for an end to President Mubarak's 30-year reign.
Hundreds of thousands of people are also protesting in Alexandria, Suez, and other cities across Egypt. New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof joins us live by phone from inside Cairo. And Nick, just set the scene for us right now. We know that the people keep gathering. Is the crowd simply getting bigger still? We still growing?
Yeah, it is still getting bigger, even though it is after curfew. And, you know, to some degree, people are losing their fear. I actually walked over to the square with some of my old Egyptian friends, a couple, and they were initially very nervous. The woman hadn't really left her apartment very much, and there's a lot of talk about infiltration, so they didn't want to go. But, you know, once they started walking and seeing so many other people there, they just kept on going, and they stayed for, you know, a couple of hours right in the middle of the square. And I think that is happening to a lot of people. I talked to a lot of parents who had kind of been egged on by their kids to come. So it's a snowball.
And Nick, we had heard reports, I don't know what position you are to verify them or not, that some of the transport routes into central Cairo had been shut down by the government. Are people talking about that? Yeah,
and that was frustrating, but people were... they were coming by taxi. They were coming by little private minibuses. They were a bunch of people were sort of carpooling. They were walking. They were coming every possible way. And there was a real feeling that this is really a part of history, that they wanted to be part of it, albeit with a little bit of anxiety.
Sure. And Nick, what about these rumors of marching toward a presidential palace? Brian Williams at the top of our broadcast said that there is some chatter about that. What are you hearing?
Yeah, that is, that has been the plan. Now, it's a little odd because you have this vast protest, and there's really no organization for it. But, that is the plan. But so far, it hasn't happened. I should say that for a completely unorganized protest, they have managed to create a certain amount of security. People get their IDs checked many times as they go in. They're frisked. Somebody near me as I entered was found with a gun, and he was immediately, grabbed, taken away to the soldiers. There was a protective cordon of volunteers around him to make sure the crowd didn't beat him up. So given chaos, the volunteers have actually done a pretty good job creating some semblance of order.
Well, Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times, we know you're right there in the thick of it as we show those live pictures. Somewhere you are among the demonstrators. It's great to have your perspective this morning. Keep checking back with us, and thank you.
A great person to be following on Twitter. I think we've all enjoyed all of his updates from the ground. Well, the Arabic news channel Al Jazeera is providing some of the most comprehensive coverage of the crisis in Egypt, even amidst Egyptian government efforts to knock the channel off the air in Cairo.
The Arabic channel's English language service is also broadcasting. We just showed you some pictures from it. It reaches 220 million households in more than 100 countries. And the crisis across the Middle East has shown the reach and influence of Al Jazeera, but of course the network's coverage has long been criticized as well. Mark Lynch is an associate professor of international affairs at George Washington University, where he is director of the Institute for Middle East Studies. And he's also attended Monday's White House meeting of some of the Egypt experts, and we want to ask you about that. We're showing these pictures from Al Jazeera. It's a lot of people have mixed feelings about this network in this country. What do you think its role has been in this particular context? Of course, it's often accused of inciting, but in this case, they seem to have the resources on the ground and are providing fairly comprehensive coverage of what's going on there.
Yeah, Al Jazeera has absolutely owned this story, and it fits right in with the sort of thing that they've been doing for the last decade. Al Jazeera, they're really invested in questions of Arab reform and Arab democracy, and they've been scathingly critical of the Arab status quo. It's the one thing that they agreed with the Bush administration about, that Arab dictators were the problem, and they've been consistent for the last year. And so what you're seeing now in Tunisia, in Jordan, in Egypt, in Yemen, they're painting a picture of an entire Arab world that's up in the streets protesting, demanding change.
Is it too much to say? I mean, the New York Times really almost gave Al Jazeera as much credit as anybody in creating the illusion of the domino effect, that the coverage in Tunisia is what triggered sort of this this energy that we're seeing in Egypt, which then of course, I mean, is it too much to give it all this credit to?
Well, I don't think you should give it that much credit, but it was absolutely essential. I mean, you have to remember that Arabs have been out in the streets protesting for the last 10 years. I mean, that's not new. What really changes is the idea that you can win. And I think that to explain why you get January 25th and not any time in the last 2 years or the last 10 years, you have to put that into the context of people watching those images on Al Jazeera at a time when Tunisia, just like Egypt, was doing everything it could to control the narrative, to silence the images, and to prevent people from seeing what was going on. Al Jazeera made that happen, working with social media, with Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. They were incredibly creative, as you've been seeing, in terms of getting these images off of the internet, putting them up online, and then everybody sees them.
And Professor, before we let you go, we have to ask you about your meeting at the White House yesterday. Who was there, and what was the general feeling?
Well, it wasn't the president. It was with senior administration officials, and the overall impression is that these guys are really on top of the situation. They understand that things are coming to a head, and they also understand that they can't be out front and telling Mubarak that he has to go publicly.
Is there an acknowledgement, though, that Mubarak's done?
I think they might not quite be there yet, but they understand that things are moving really fast.
Did you get a sense this could change our policies towards Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Jordan, for instance?
Everybody is watching really carefully, and I think the reason that they've been in constant communication with leaders around the region, and they're going to be telling them, you have to reform now. We can't protect you anymore. That we've been asking you to do this for the last decade. You've ignored us. Now's the time.
All right, Professor Mark Lynch, it's good to have your perspective this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.